morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time. And this was a video I felt we had to do. Jerome Powell in a couple of Fed Q&As has talked about housing reset. He's come out and kind of clarified what he thinks that is. He has used very specific vernacular that I think a lot of people have jumped on and maybe reading incorrectly. So I wanted to watch this together and then give you kind of my translation. And the one and only Millennial Mike has been gracious enough to find and cut up the clip. So thank you for all of this.
Yeah, no problem. Let's jump right in.
Existing home sales have fallen for 7 months straight. Mortgage rates are at their highest level since 2008. Yet mortgage demand increased this week and housing prices are still elevated. Now, at the end of your June press conference, you mentioned plans to reset the housing market. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean when you say reset and what you think it will take to actually get there.
So when I say reset, I'm not looking at a particular specific, set of data or anything. What I'm really saying is that we've had a time of a red hot housing market all over the country where, famously houses were selling to the first buyer at 10% above the ask before even seeing the house, that kind of thing. So there was a big imbalance between supply and demand. Housing prices were going up at an unsustainably fast level. So the deceleration in housing prices that we're seeing should help bring sort of prices more closely in line with rents and other housing market fundamentals. And that's a good thing. For the longer term, what we need is supply and demand to get better aligned so that housing prices go up at a reasonable level, at a reasonable pace, and that people can afford houses again. And I think we probably in the housing market have to go through a correction to get back to that place. There are also longer run issues though with the housing market, as you know, where it's difficult to find lots now close enough to cities and things like that. So builders are having a hard time getting zoning and lots and workers and materials and things like that. But from a sort of business cycle standpoint, this difficult correction should put the housing market back into better balance.
Shelter made up such a large part of this hot CPI report that we saw. Do you think that there is a lag and that we will see that come down in the coming months, or do you think that there's still this imbalance that needs to be addressed?
I think that shelter inflation is going to remain high for some time. We're looking for it to come down, but it's not exactly clear when that will happen. So it may take some time. So I think hope for the best, plan for the worst. So I think on shelter inflation, you just got to assume that it's going to remain pretty high for a while.
All right, Mike. So he did clarify that he's not talking about one specific data point, but he would like to see supply and demand come back a little bit closer to being in balance. But ultimately, housing prices, shelter inflation is going to remain high for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in there, and I took a bunch of notes, and I'm just going to go down the list. So first and foremost, red hot housing market clearly was unstable. I've talked about that a lot. When you have markets go up 30% a year, that is not okay. Right. And then when they go up 30% one year and 30% the next year, not okay. And again, I would argue that the Fed did that. The Fed and the pandemic, right? The Fed gave rates. Again, we did the math, right? 2020 and 2021 were the second and third best year ever to buy a home, mathematically speaking, on payment basis. So people should have been buying, right? That's what they should have been doing. It was the right thing to do. Next up, the one that I really jumped at was the imbalance of supply and demand. And this is where I think a lot of channels don't appreciate what that means. So there's a lot of channels that are talking about a housing crash because they are only looking at the demand crashing. A lot of these channels are like, hey, at 6%, according to Black Knight, we lost 14 million buyers. I agree. At 7%, we probably lose 18 or 20 million buyers. I actually asked John Burns, consultant I had on my show. He's like, yeah, 2022, something like that, not unheard of. Demand destruction. So everybody latches on to demand destruction. I try to look ahead. And as the Ryan Pineda video correctly pointed out that we reacted to earlier, we have supply destruction on a record level. We're just going to have people not sell, at least not sell now, right? Their family situation doesn't mean they have to sell. So we're going to have years of below trend active listings. And something that I called a month ago was that inventory was going to surprise lower. So, and again, all the crash channels are like, no, Michael, supply has to go up. People miss the top. They're going to, I'm like, I don't think so. I think supply is going to fall. And we've already seen active listings fall. But where do I go with this? Is supply and demand could get balanced in two places. I believe what Jerome Powell was talking about, and most people think, is we're going to get supply demand balanced at 6 million transactions, which is historically where we've been the last decade, 6 million. What I'm here to tell Jerome and all these people watching is, yeah, we're going to get balanced, but it'll be at 4 million transactions, 3.8 million transactions. The housing market is in a depression. The housing market is going to lead the country into a recession. Less transactions, less commission, less remodels, less. And oh, by the way, builders aren't building because they can't do it profitably, as Jerome said at the end. And then finally, rent inflation. Here is the big gotcha in all of this. Jerome Powell is raising rates. Housing is getting less affordable. Less people can buy, less people will sell. What is going to happen to rent? Rent goes up in houses. This negative feedback loop of rent on single family, not good. We are going to have rent inflation or owner's equivalent rent be a sticking point for this is why I think we're going to have inflation for years that people don't see coming. It's going to be wage inflation, rent inflation, services. We're in for some tough times. But yeah, that was kind of my feedback. Housing reset is not the great reset, which everybody wanted. He did talk about a housing correction. He didn't define what that is. A housing correction, generally speaking, is 10% in price. We'll see. He didn't say a duration. If you get a 10% drop in prices over 5 years, is that the crash that everybody wants? I don't see it happening in a short window. The largest crash in a single year nationally is 8.9% negative. I don't see us beating that. But yeah, we'll see. Again, I think Jerome's going to be shocked that we will balance supply and demand. It's just going to be at a much, much, much lower transaction level. And that's going to have ripples through the economy. It's going to pull us into a recession. It's that's how I see things unfolding today.
So if I look at your analysis, and obviously my ability to analyze at quite the same level as you is not there. But I have sort of had the same thought that shelter pricing, rental prices, housing prices are all going up. It's unsustainable. People can't afford to buy houses, which pushes would-be homeowners back into the rental market, which is going to continue to drive rental prices up. So my thought has been, as I pay attention to the trends over the last few years, that the government is going to step in with programs like Section 8. Maybe they open them up to more people. Maybe they make it more accessible to more people. And so I have been moving towards more Section 8 rentals, even though I have a small portfolio, but that's what I've been doing. Do you see the government expanding a Section 8 program to alleviate what people are feeling?
I think they're going to do two things. So absolutely. I think it's already in the plans. I think the Section 8 program has been given more money or more vouchers, as I think they generally count it. So I think that's already happening and probably continues for sure. But the big gotcha in all of this, which again is anytime the government gets involved, they just mess things up. I believe or fear what is going to happen is as soon as next year, we're going to see first-time homebuyer programs ratchet up 10, 20, 30%. And all that's going to do is create more competition for unicorns, which is going to, again, take some supply off the market and, again, increase rent. So I think the Fed's job is remarkably hard, but I do think the government is adding fuel to the fire, making their job harder, right? When Congress comes out and sends stimulus checks or whatever they do to spend money, and then they come out with these programs that creates more, it makes Jerome Powell's job harder. Not that his job is easy to begin with, but yeah, I think there's multiple things that the government's going to do to muck things up.
Well, folks, I'll admit that as a police officer, I don't have to analyze the economics or macroeconomics in the same degree that Mike does. So if, like me, you have questions about 45-minute long press conferences given by chairman of the Fed, who's very politically correctly saying things so as not to cause a disturbance, if you want those videos broken down by somebody who actually knows what's being said and reads between the lines, tag me in the video, send it my way, send it to Mike, and we will make sure that we get it queued up for him to react to, break down, and explain for you guys.
Awesome. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for 2 hours. You gave this channel 2 hours of your time today. I appreciate you. Take care.